A new report from 13 federal agencies states that humans are the leading cause of the rise in global temperatures. The document was approved for release by the White House despite contradicting policies and positions of top administration officials. It comes as the United Nations convenes for its annual climate change conference, with the implementation of the Paris Climate Accord top of the agenda. That's an agreement that the United States has withdrawn from. Here at MetroFocus, through our initiative, Peril and Promise, the challenge of climate change, we're committed to covering the human impact of our changing planet. Tonight, one of the leading voices in the climate justice movement, activist Bill McKibben, is the founder of the Grassroots climate change organisation 350.org. His first and newly released novel, Radio Free Vermont, follows a band of Vermont patriots who decide that their state might be better off as its own republic. I'm delighted to welcome Bill to the programme. Bill, great to have you here.
Very good to be with you.
Let's start off with that report. Very detailed, stated that there's no convincing alternative explanation that anything other than humans are to blame for the rise in temperatures. What did you make of the report?
Well, at this point, there's no way to issue a scientific report that would say anything different. I mean, I wrote the first book on climate change back in 1989. We basically knew then what was going on. And by this point, it's so overwhelming that you couldn't round up a group of scientists to produce a credible report that said anything different. The White House, of course, is opposed to acting on climate change, not because it has some superior scientific insight, just because it's a captive of the fossil fuel industry.
Why has the fossil fuel industry become so emboldened? I mean, you look at the past year under the APA with Scott Pruitt there, we've seen the repeal of the Clean Power Plan there. I know there are big pockets involved here, but beyond that, why have they been so effective?
They've been working on this a very long time. I mean, what's going on at the EPA really has some degree less to do with Donald Trump than it does to do with the Koch brothers, who've been waiting for this for a very, very long time. And all their dreams came true in the last election, both at the White House and in Congress. And so they're moving quickly to try they know they can't hold off renewable energy forever, but they'd settle for another 20, 30 years of current business models, even if that means breaking the planet, which at this point it appears it would.
So you've spoken there about the effectiveness of the fossil fuel industry. On the other side, you wrote in a recent piece that the hurricanes that we saw, which swept the Caribbean, Houston and Florida in the past few months, jives with what scientists and environmentalists have spent 30 fruitless years telling us to expect from global warming. Why such a lack of achievement over the past 30 years in terms of getting the message across?
Well, the message has gotten across. We're to the point where 70% of Americans understand that human beings are warming the planet. Given what we know about public opinion, I mean, that's pretty good. Half of the U.S. still thinks Elvis is alive. I mean, you know, we've done a good job. But the fossil fuel industry is the richest single enterprise that human beings have ever built. And it's been willing to use that money to try and stifle any real progress.
You started an organisation, 350.org, which is focused on spreading the message. When we look at the media and consider a story such as the Paris Climate Agreement, there's a complete shortage when it comes to coverage of climate issues. Why do you think mainstream media organisations are they scared of covering this issue? Is it lack of resources?
In part, they're intimidated like everyone else by the fossil fuel industry, but it's also hard journalistically. Every single day, there's something else more immediate going on, okay? There's some scandal, some horrible massacre or something. Every single day, the most important thing that's going on is this rapid and dangerous heating of the planet, but it goes on in the background. And journalism has a little harder time coping, as you know, with the background than the foreground.
Is it a difficulty in trying to make these stories relevant to a mainstream audience?
That was the problem 30 years ago. It's a heck of a lot less of a problem now that Mother Nature is doing her best to hit us upside the head with a 2x4. We just had the biggest rainstorm in American history with Hurricane Harvey, the biggest windstorm with Hurricane Irma, and Hurricane Maria that took Puerto Rico back 30 years. I mean, people are starting to pay attention.
I want to switch now to your novel. When we consider all the events that are happening and what's happening at the White House, one would think that as a leading writer on this, you might want to go focus on nonfiction, present the facts when it comes to climate change and what can be done to prevent it. you've now switched to fiction. What was the decision?
Well, don't worry.
That?
I'm in the middle of another long, depressing book that'll be out before you know it.
Of course.
But look, this seemed like the year also when we need a little bit of a break. This is a funny book. It's also about a small place, Vermont, where I live. It attempts to remind us that there really is something powerful and beautiful about resistance. And it's an attempt, if nothing else, to cheer myself up a little bit in what seems like the darkest political year I can remember.
You spoke there about Vermont and perhaps taking action at a grassroots level when we don't necessarily agree with the actions of our leaders on a federal level. Are you optimistic that there is change at a local level?
Yes. The day that Trump pulled out of Paris, he said, you know, I was elected to govern Pittsburgh, not Paris. That afternoon, the mayor of Pittsburgh said, you know what, our city is going 100% renewable, thank you very much. That is really good, strong resistance action. The problem is, if we're going to catch up with the physics of climate change, we need everybody moving fast in the right direction. So the Trump years can't be spun, I'm afraid. They're a real roadblock in the way of action. But as with all roadblocks, people are figuring out what alternate routes they can.
And when we consider resistance, your organization, 350.org, has held protests. This really stood out to me in every country across the world, apart from North Korea. You've traveled to many of those. What struck you the most about those countries that you visited and protested at?
One of the things that's most moving about this big worldwide climate movement is that so much of it, well, comes in the places where people didn't do anything to cause this problem.
Like?
The tropical countries around the world, the poor countries around the world that haven't put any carbon in the atmosphere, but are getting hit even harder than we are by the changes in the weather that we've helped kick off.
Bill McKibben's first novel is titled Radio Free Vermont. He's the founder of 350.org. Bill, thanks so much for joining us.
What a pleasure.